Every one of these films opens with the same sentence, and it's a genuinely odd sentence once you stop on it. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, past tense, somebody is telling you about something that has already finished, which means every duel and every prophecy and every impossible coincidence you're about to hear about is being reported to you secondhand by a narrator nobody has ever named, about events that were over before anyone alive had been born. That does something strange to a story. It stops being an account and becomes a record. And records drift. They get copied badly, corrected by people who weren't there, and argued over by people who no longer have the original, which is roughly the shape of tonight. 8 subjects, no particular order, no ending you need to stay awake for. If you drift off somewhere in the middle of the clone army bit, you haven't missed a payoff, because there isn't one. And if you like this sort of thing, subscribing does genuinely help. Right, let's start with a prophecy nobody could actually read. Something got me the first time I noticed this, and I've never quite got over it. For about 20 years, people argued viciously about the Chosen One prophecy, what it meant, whether Anakin fulfilled it, whether balance meant no dark side, or equal amounts of both, or something weirder. Message boards, pub arguments, entire channels built on the question, and for that entire 2 decades, nobody arguing had ever read the prophecy, because it had never been printed, anywhere. The films never quote it, not one line. Qui-Gon refers to it, the Council debates it, Obi-Wan screams about it on a lava planet, and at no point does anyone say the actual words. We were all doing textual analysis on a text that didn't exist. It finally turned up in 2019 in a novel called Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray, which is mostly about Qui-Gon and a much younger, much stroppier Obi-Wan. And it's short, almost disappointingly short. A chosen one shall come, born of no father, and through him will ultimate balance in the Force be restored. That's it. That's the sentence the entire saga hangs off. I remember reading that and having a genuine moment of, oh, right, that's not much to go on, is it? 2 clauses, one of which is a birth detail and the other of which uses a word nobody has ever defined. And the book does something else I find quietly brilliant, which is that it doesn't give you just the one prophecy. It gives you a handful, all sitting together in the same body of Jedi text, all equally cryptic. She who will be born to darkness will give birth to darkness. When the Kyber that is not Kyber shines forth, the time of prophecy will be at hand. When the righteous lose the light, evil once dead shall return. One will ascend to the highest of the Jedi, despite the foreboding of those who would serve with him. There's a longer one about a sacrifice of many Jedi and a danger that sleeps in an egg. And there's one I'm going to mention now and then leave alone for a while because it comes back later and I don't want to spoil my own video. He who learns to conquer death will through his greatest student live again. Sit with that lot for a second. That's the corpus. That's what the Jedi were working from. It's not a manual. It's a pile of riddles written by people who have been dead for centuries in a tradition the Order barely takes seriously anymore. Master and Apprentice makes a point of that, actually. By Qui-Gon's era, prophecy is deeply unfashionable inside the Jedi. It's the sort of thing an eccentric master gets a bit obsessed with, while everyone else quietly changes the subject. Which makes what happens next a lot more understandable and a lot sadder. Qui-Gon meets a 9-year-old slave on Tatooine who has no father, wins a pod race by doing things a human body should not be able to do, and has a midi-chlorian count higher than anything the Order has on record. And Qui-Gon, who is one of the few people still taking the old texts seriously, does the maths in about 4 seconds. Born of no father. Ultimate balance. This is him. The Council does not do the maths in 4 seconds. Yoda takes one look at the boy and finds fear in him. Mace Windu declines to train him, and you can hear the exact moment where the whole thing turns. Because Qui-Gon says the words, "He is the chosen one, you must see it," and the room doesn't move. Then Qui-Gon dies with a hole in his chest, and Obi-Wan makes a promise to a dying man, and the council reverses itself. Not because they were persuaded, because a great Jedi died asking for it. That's the first crack. Anakin doesn't get into the Order on merit or on doctrine. He gets in on grief, now, balance. This is where everyone loses their minds, and I want to lay out the readings fairly because I genuinely don't think there's a clean answer. Reading 1, the popular one for years. Balance means equal numbers. 10,000 Jedi and 2 Sith is not balance, it's a landslide. And therefore the prophecy required almost all the Jedi to die. Under this reading, Anakin fulfills the prophecy in Revenge of the Sith rather than Return of the Jedi, and he does it by walking into the temple with a battalion behind him. I've never bought this one. I understand why it's satisfying. It makes the tragedy load-bearing. It makes Anakin's worst act secretly correct. But nothing in the material supports the idea that the Force is doing a head count. It's a reading that works better as a fan theory than as a description of anything anyone in the story believes. Reading 2, the Jedi's Own. Balance means the destruction of the Sith. The dark side is a corruption, not a counterweight. You don't balance a wound by making another wound. Obi-Wan says this outright on Mustafar, and it's worth quoting because it's the clearest statement of what the Order thought it had signed up for. You were the chosen one. It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them. Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness. Reading 3 is Lucas's, and it's more interesting than either. He's talked about this more than once, and his framing keeps coming back to something psychological rather than cosmic. In the commentary for the 3rd season of the Clone Wars, he describes the light side as the selfless and the dark side as the selfish, and balance as the act of keeping the selfish part in check. Not eliminating it, checking it. He's been very consistent that the dark side is more like a cancer than like one half of a symmetrical whole, and also very consistent that both impulses live inside every person. He's also said flatly that Anakin is the chosen one, and that the Jedi simply misread what that meant. And there's Yoda, who in Revenge of the Sith says the line everyone forgets, the prophecy could have been misread. He says it early. He says it after everything has gone wrong, and then the Order proceeds as if he hadn't. So here's the shape of the thing, and this is the bit I actually find fascinating rather than just tidy. The prophecy is the reason Anakin is in the temple at all. He's 9, which is years past the cutoff. He has attachments, a mother he's just left behind, a whole life he remembers. Under any normal circumstance, he does not get in. The only reason the door opens is that a group of people believe a sentence they cannot interpret and cannot verify, written by someone they cannot name. And having let him in on those grounds, they then treat him strangely for 13 years. They watch him. Mace doesn't trust him. They put him on the council without granting him the rank, which is possibly the single most insulting thing you can do to a proud 22-year-old. They ask him to spy on the Chancellor. And when he has the worst nightmare of his life, the one place he cannot take it is to them, because the doctrine that was supposed to protect him has instead made him a man with an enormous secret. Every one of those decisions is downstream of the prophecy. The prophecy created the pressure. The pressure created the fall. And the fall is what eventually, 20-odd years later, produces the moment on the second Death Star, where a dying man picks up an emperor and drops him down a shaft. So it gets fulfilled. Lucas says so, canon reference material says so, and I'd say the films say so too. But it gets fulfilled by the exact thing everyone was trying to prevent. The Jedi read a prophecy, took steps because of it, and the steps produced the outcome. Not despite them, through them. There's a very old version of this story, and I don't want to labour it, but it's Oedipus, isn't it? Man hears prophecy, man takes decisive action to avoid prophecy. Decisive action is the mechanism by which prophecy occurs. The Greeks were doing this 2,500 years ago, and we're still doing it with laser swords. The bit I find genuinely poignant, though, isn't the structure, it's Obi-Wan. At the very end of Master and Apprentice, there's a line where Qui-Gon says, "It matters which side we choose, even if there will never be more light than darkness, even if there can be no more joy in the galaxy than there is pain." And that's a man who believes in prophecy, saying essentially that the prophecy doesn't get you off the hook. You still have to choose. The future being written doesn't tell you what to do on a Tuesday. Obi-Wan never really gets there. He spends the prequels being the sensible one and being wrong about it. And then he spends 19 years in a cave on Tatooine. And by the time we meet him in A New Hope, he stopped talking about prophecy altogether. He talks about Luke instead. Not as the chosen one, just as a boy who might be able to do something, which might be the healthiest thing anyone in this story ever does with a prophecy, honestly. Stop reading it. Go and help someone. There's one more clause in that sentence I should deal with before I move on, because it's the bit that has generated more theories than the rest of it combined. Born of no father. Shmi's account, when Qui-Gon asks her directly, is that there was no father. She carried him, she gave birth to him, she can't explain it. And she says it plainly, without any of the reverence you'd expect from someone describing a miracle. It's the flat delivery that makes it land. Now, the popular theory, and I've believed it myself at various points, so I'm not looking down on anyone, is that a Sith did it. Specifically, that Palpatine's old master reached into the midi-chlorians and created life, because Palpatine tells us, in the Opera House, that this was a thing his master could do. And here's where I have to be a bit annoying about sourcing, because this is one of those cases where a theory has been repeated so often that people have started stating it as fact. In the current canon, it isn't true. Anakin was conceived by the Force. That's it. No Sith involvement, no experiment, nothing. Where the theory comes from is a rough draft of Revenge of the Sith, in which Palpatine flat out says he was responsible for Anakin's birth, using midi-chlorian manipulation. Lucas cut it. It never made the film, and it's never been reinstated. And then there's the Old Legends novel about Plagueis, which does something more interesting than either version. In that book, Plagueis and Sidious are conducting experiments to bend the midi-chlorians to their will, and the Force pushes back. Anakin isn't their creation, he's the response. The midi-chlorians refused to be directed, and then went and made the one being capable of ending the Sith, essentially as a counterpunch. I want to be clear that this is Legends. It's not canon and hasn't been since 2014, but as a piece of construction it's lovely, and it does something the other readings don't, which is that it makes the Sith responsible for their own destruction in a completely literal way. They reach for control over life. Life sends them a boy from a scrapyard on Tatooine. Whether any of that holds is a matter of which shelf you take your books from. What I'd say is that the canon version is quieter and probably better. Nobody made him. He just turned up, in the worst part of the galaxy, in the possession of a junk dealer, with more raw potential in him than any recorded Jedi. And the first thing the universe did with the person who was going to restore ultimate balance was let him be born a slave. Nobody in the Order ever really deals with that, incidentally. Qui-Gon frees the boy and leaves his mother behind, because the dice only covered one of them. That's the transaction that starts the entire prequel trilogy, and everybody involved treats it as a slightly awkward bit of admin. And one more thing about the Count, since I've mentioned it twice now, and should probably explain why I keep coming back to it. The midi-chlorian test is the only piece of hard evidence anyone produces for any of this. Qui-Gon takes a blood sample in a hut on Tatooine, sends it to Obi-Wan on the ship, and gets a number back that is higher than Yoda's. That number is the whole case. It's what he takes to the council. It's what makes them look twice at a boy they've already decided against. Which means the most important decision the Jedi ever made was taken on the basis of a blood test and a poem. I'm not sure that's wrong exactly, you work with what you've got, but there is something faintly comic about an order of mystics reaching for a lab result the moment things get serious, and then reading a 2-line prophecy as if it were a legal document. They wanted certainty. They had access to precisely one measurable thing, so they measured it, and then they built a childhood around the result. And that's the version of the trap that happens to an institution. Slow procedural, spread across 1,000 small decisions. There's a meaner, faster version of the same thing that happens to exactly one person, and it happens in a bedroom on Coruscant in the middle of the night. The dream is short. That's what I always notice about it. It's not a long prophetic sequence with symbolism you have to unpick. It's Padme, in pain calling out, and then nothing. Anakin wakes up in the dark next to her, with his heart going, and she asks him if it's the same one, and he says yes. Same one. Not the first time. And this is the piece I think most people skate past because it happens in a different film, and 3 years earlier in the timeline. Anakin has done this before, and it worked exactly the way he's afraid it's going to work now. In Attack of the Clones, he's having nightmares about his mother. He describes them the same way. She's suffering. He can feel it. He can't stop it. And he does nothing about it for a while because he's a Padawan on assignment, and you don't just leave. Then he goes. He gets to Tatooine. He tracks her to a Tusken camp. He cuts her free, and she dies in his arms roughly 90 seconds later, having stayed alive apparently through sheer stubbornness, long enough to see his face. So by the time he's lying awake next to Padme, Anakin Skywalker has one data point, and the data point says this: the dreams are real, and by the time you act on them, it is already too late. That's not superstition. That's induction. He is reasoning perfectly correctly from the evidence available to him, and it is going to destroy everything. Now, the Jedi position on all of this is that visions are unreliable, and you shouldn't chase them. Yoda's version, when Anakin finally works up the nerve to ask him about it in a vague terms, is basically that death is a natural part of life, and you should train yourself to let go of everything you're afraid to lose, which is, I want to be fair here, not bad advice in the abstract. It's just catastrophically the wrong advice for this man on this day, delivered by someone who has not been told what's actually going on. And he hasn't been told because Anakin is secretly married and has been for 3 years. That's the mechanism. The whole thing runs on that. If Anakin can say out loud, "My wife is pregnant and I dreamt she died," the conversation goes somewhere else entirely. Maybe somewhere still bad but different. He can't say it because saying it means expulsion, so he goes to the only other person in his life who has ever listened to him without a caveat attached. Palpatine has been waiting 13 years for that walk down the corridor. And then there's the opera house. I love this scene, in a slightly horrified way. They're sitting in a private box watching some sort of aquatic ballet, and Palpatine leans over and tells him a story. Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? It's not a story the Jedi would tell you. Just take a second on that name. Plagueis. It sounds like plague. It sounds like mass death. And the story is about a man who found the cure for death, who could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life, and who could keep the people he cared about from dying. A character whose name means widespread death, presented as the one being who ever beat it. That's not an accident. That's a man choosing a bedtime story very carefully. And the detail that gets me, every time, is what Palpatine actually offers, which is nothing. Go back and listen to it. He never says he can do it. He never says he knows how. He says Plagueis could do it, that Plagueis taught his apprentice everything he knew and was then killed in his sleep, and that it's ironic he could save others from death, but not himself. When Anakin asks if it's possible to learn this power, the answer is not from a Jedi. That's the whole offer. Later, in the Chancellor's office on Coruscant, the closest he ever gets is that together they will discover the secret. Together. Discover. Future tense. He is promising a research project. Anakin destroys a religious order, murders children, chokes his pregnant wife, and gets set on fire. for a research project that was never opened. I don't think I've ever seen a con quite that clean in anything else, and I include actual crime documentaries in that. So the sequence goes like this. He has a dream that Padme dies. To prevent the dream, he needs power he doesn't have. To get the power, he protects the man who claims to know about it, which means killing Mace Windu, which means the Fall, which means Mustafar. Padme comes to Mustafar because Obi-Wan is stowed away on her ship, and because she still believes she can talk him out of it. Anakin sees Obi-Wan come down the ramp, decides she's betrayed him, and chokes her unconscious. Same trap as the prophecy then, just faster and meaner, and aimed at one man. It's not a warning about a future, it's a set of instructions for building one. And then there's the bit the saga has never cleaned up, which I'm going to lay out honestly rather than pretend I've solved. Padme is taken to Polis Massa. The medical droid examines her and says, more or less, that she is medically completely healthy. For reasons it can't explain, she's losing the will to live. And then she has the twins and dies. That's the explanation. That's all we get. A woman with 2 newborn children in the room decides, at some level, not to continue. People have been chewing on this ever since, and the answers all have problems. The stress reading, that trauma can genuinely kill people, which is true, struggles with a droid explicitly saying, she's fine. The force reading, that Palpatine is draining her, or that Anakin's turn is somehow siphoning her, is popular and satisfying, but has never been confirmed anywhere I'd be comfortable stating as facts. The reading that the droid is simply wrong is fine, but a bit deflating. And the reading that she died of a broken heart is what the film seems to want, and is also the one that sits worst with a lot of viewers. For obvious reasons. I don't have a favourite. I've genuinely gone back and forth on it for years. What I'd say is that it's one of the few genuinely unresolved holes in the saga that nobody has quietly patched in a novel afterwards. And there's something almost respectful about leaving it open. Not everything gets a supplementary explanation. Some things just sit there. But the paradox underneath it is the interesting part, and it doesn't depend on solving the medical question. If the vision showed him a real future, then the future was always going to happen, and everything he did was part of it. If the vision showed him a possible future, then he had a choice, and the choice he made was the one that guaranteed it. Either way, the vision is not information, it's a lever, and somebody else was holding the other end. Yoda's line about the future is that it's always in motion, difficult to see, which sounds like reassurance and is actually a warning about exactly this. If the future is in motion, then looking at it is an act that moves it. I think about this one, in ordinary terms, more than I probably should. Not the Sith bit, obviously. The other bit. The thing where you get so worried about a relationship ending that you start checking and asking and needing reassurance. And the checking and the asking is what wears the thing down. Or you're so frightened of being made redundant that you go quiet and defensive and stop taking risks. And the version of you that shows up to work is a worse employee than the one who wasn't scared. Nobody needed a Sith Lord to arrange any of that. The mechanism is just standing there in ordinary life, free of charge. Anakin's version has a Sith Lord attached, which is unlucky, but the engine is the same engine. There's a second loop wrapped around the first one here, and it belongs to the Jedi rather than to Anakin, so it's worth a few minutes on its own. The rule about attachment exists for a specific reason. The Order's position, stated repeatedly, is that possessive love is the entry point for fear, and fear is the entry point for everything else. You can care about people, you're not supposed to need them. And the reason for the rule is that a Jedi who needs somebody can be leaned on, and a Jedi who can be leaned on is dangerous with a lightsaber, which is, I have to admit, entirely correct. Everything the Order predicted about Anakin came true precisely as described. Fear of loss, then anger, then a man standing in a hangar full of children. The problem is what the rule does in practice, because it doesn't stop him falling in love. Nothing was ever going to stop that. All it does is make the love secret. And a secret is exactly the thing that a manipulator needs. Because a secret means there's a category of problem you can only discuss with one person. So the doctrine designed to prevent a Jedi from being compromised is the reason this particular Jedi is compromised. It didn't fail to work. It worked in reverse at full power for the whole of his adult life. And you can see the Order almost noticing. Obi-Wan clearly knows something. He makes remarks. Palpatine is openly courting his student in front of everyone, and nobody intervenes in any meaningful way, partly because the Chancellor is the Chancellor, and partly because the Council's relationship with Anakin is so strained by that point that they've effectively outsourced the emotional side of it to whoever will take it. There's a version of this where somebody sits down with him at 20 and says, "Look, we know, tell us." And that conversation is impossible, structurally, because of a rule written to prevent this exact outcome. I find that more tragic than the lava, honestly. The lava is spectacle. What actually kills the Republic is a young man who couldn't tell anyone he was married. One thing I always notice about Palpatine's timing too, he doesn't move on Anakin during the good years. He waits. He waits until the war has gone on long enough that everyone is exhausted. He waits until the Council has passed Anakin over for the rank. He waits until Obi-Wan has been sent off-world, which removes the one person Anakin might have confided in. And then he tells him, in a room with the door closed, that he is the only one who has ever been honest with him. Which was, and this is the awful part, largely true. Everyone else in that young man's life had been managing him. The Sith Lord was the only person treating him like an adult, and he was doing it as a technique. One last small thing, because it's the sort of detail I like, and it doesn't fit anywhere else. The dream never actually shows him what kills her. It shows her in pain, and it shows her calling his name. That's it. He fills in the rest. Childbirth, illness, something medical, something he could stop with the right power. He decides what the dream means, and then organises his life around his own interpretation. Nobody ever tells him he's in the dream. He assumes he's the one watching it. Anyway, that's the private version, one man and one bad night. Since we're on the subject of things that were set in motion long before anybody noticed, let's talk about an army that was ordered by a man who was already dead. There's a room in the Jedi Temple that I'd quite like to see more of, and we only really get one proper scene in it. It's the map room. Obi-Wan is standing in the middle of a projected star field, hunting for a planet he's been given coordinates for, and the coordinates lead to a patch of empty space. Not a mislabeled system. Not a planet under a different name. Nothing. There's a gap. And the thing is, the gap has gravity. That's what he notices, or rather what Yoda's group of very small students say, is that someone erased the planet from the archive memory about 4 seconds after he shows it to them. Every star in the region is being pulled towards something. The mass is still there. The thing at the centre of it is doing everything a planet does, and it simply isn't on the chart. Before that, though, Obi-Wan asks the temple's archivist about it, and Jocasta Nu gives him what might be my favourite line of institutional confidence in anything. She says that if an item does not appear in their records, it does not exist. I love her for that. Genuinely. She says it with total warmth, absolutely no malice, complete certainty, and she is talking about a populated ocean world with an industrial economy. The archive is not describing reality, the archive is defining it. And she has been running that archive for so long that the distinction has stopped occurring to her. Then a group of children work it out in the time it takes to eat a biscuit, and Obi-Wan flies off to a planet that doesn't exist, which brings us to Sifo Dyas, who is my pick for the most consequential person in Star Wars that most casual viewers have never heard of. He gets named in one scene by an alien prime minister in a conversation that most people are half listening to because they're waiting for Jango Fett to show up. Lama Su tells Obi-Wan that the army was commissioned about 10 years ago by a Jedi Master called Sifo-Dyas on behalf of the Republic. Obi-Wan does the polite thing where you pretend you knew that, and the film essentially never returns to it. Here's what we've since been told about him, and it makes the whole thing considerably stranger. Sifo-Dyas was real. He was a genuine Jedi Master. He sat on the High Council, and he was gifted, if that's the word, with foresight. Not the vague kind. The kind that arrives whether you want it or not. From his first year as a Padawan, and which caused him a great deal of stress for the rest of his life. He was also, for what it's worth, an old friend of Dooku's from their student days, which is going to matter shortly. And at some point he sees a war coming, a big one, the kind that ravages the galaxy. And he concludes correctly, as it turns out, that the Republic will not survive it without an army. He takes this to the Council. The Council does not agree. The Republic hasn't had a standing army in living memory or anywhere near it, and the Jedi are supposed to be keepers of the peace, not soldiers. And a Jedi Master arriving with a vision and a proposal for mass military production is going to get roughly the reception you'd expect. So he goes and does it anyway, off his own back, without authorization from the Council or the Senate. He walks into the most accomplished cloning operation in the galaxy and commissions an army of over 1 million soldiers on behalf of a republic that has not asked for one and will not know it exists for another decade. And then he dies. The circumstances of that took a very long time to fill in. The short version, Chancellor Valorum sends him on a quiet diplomatic errand to a moon called Obadiah to deal with the Pike Syndicate. His shuttle gets shot down. It's not bad luck. Dooku, by then already secretly serving Sidious, already Darth Tyrannus, though still walking around in Jedi robes for a bit longer, has paid the Pikes to do it. Then Tyrannus turns up on Kamino, poses as a Jedi representing Sifo-Dyas, and takes over the project. He tells the Kaminoans to keep it quiet. He hires Jango Fett as the template. And in a short film released in 2022 called Tales of the Jedi, we finally see the last piece. Dooku walking into the temple archives and using Sifo-Dyas' own access codes to delete Kamino from the records. The timing of that scene is a lovely bit of construction, by the way. As he finishes, he gets word that his old apprentice Qui-Gon has been in a fight on Tatooine. So the deletion happens on the same night as the duel in The Phantom Menace, which means the hole in the star chart Obi-Wan finds 10 years later was put there while his own master was dying. Right, so, the paradox. A man with the ability to see the future sees a war. Because he sees it, he builds an army. The army is what makes the war fightable at that scale. Without a grand army sitting in a warehouse on an ocean planet, the Republic's response to the Separatists looks completely different, and quite possibly doesn't look like a galactic war at all. And that same army is the instrument that eventually wipes out his own order. So did he see the future, or did he build it? That not again, scaled up from one marriage to one civilization. If Sifo-Dyas doesn't have the vision, there's no army. If there's no army, there is probably no Clone Wars in the form we got. If there's no Clone Wars, Palpatine's entire plan needs rebuilding from the ground up. He is, in a real sense, one of the 2 or 3 people who made the Empire possible, and he did it out of concern for the Republic, and he was murdered for his trouble before he could see any of it. There's a smaller paradox sitting underneath this one that I keep coming back to, and it's the archive. Deleting Kamino from the records did not do anything to Kamino. The planet carried on. The oceans carried on. 200,000 units were grown, and 1 million more were on the way. All of it happening in real time, in the physical universe, entirely unaffected by the state of a filing system on Coruscant, and yet it worked perfectly. Because the Jedi don't act on the universe. They act on what they know about it, and what they knew was a database. That's the part that feels less like science fiction and more like something you've watched happen at work. The gap between a thing being true and a thing being usable is enormous, and institutions live entirely on the second one. Jocasta Nu was not being stupid, she was being an archivist. She was describing accurately how her institution functions. If it's not in the record, the institution cannot see it, and an institution that cannot see something might as well be blind to it. The gravity was still there the whole time. Nobody was looking at the gravity, and the fun fact I'd tack onto the end of this one, because it delights me. That question, who ordered the clones, who deleted the file, gets raised on screen in 2002. Yoda and Mace stand around at the end of Attack of the Clones being visibly unsettled about it. And the full answer doesn't arrive on screen until 2022. 20 years across a film, an animated series, a second animated series, and a short-form anthology to close a loop about a man who is never once seen in a live-action Star Wars film. You could call that a mess. I'd call it patient. There's something quite charming about a franchise that will leave a thread hanging for 2 decades and then quietly tie it off in a 15-minute cartoon that a lot of people never watched. And there's one more piece to this that I keep chewing on, because it's not a time loop or a records problem. It's just a very neat trap. The army arrives with the Jedi already attached to it. Think about how that actually goes. Obi-Wan finds 1 million soldiers on an ocean world. Yoda takes them to Geonosis to rescue him, because there is no other option available in the time frame. And within a matter of weeks, the Jedi Order, an organization of diplomats and negotiators, roughly 10,000 people, whose entire self-description is keepers of the peace, has been converted into an officer corps. Nobody voted on that. There's no scene where the council decides to become generals. It simply happens because the army needs commanders, and they're the only people in the Republic with the training, the authority, and the tendency to say yes. And that transformation is the thing that makes Order 66 possible in the shape it takes, not the chips, the proximity. If the Jedi had stayed diplomats, they'd have been scattered across the galaxy in 1s and 2s, in embassies and monasteries, hard to find and harder to reach. Instead, every one of them spends 3 years standing at the front of a formation of men who have been engineered to kill them on a phrase. They live with them. They eat with them. They learn their names. Palpatine didn't have to hunt the Jedi. He arranged for them to be issued their own executioners as staff, and then waited 3 years for the relationships to get close enough that nobody would see it coming. Which loops back round to Sifo Dyas in a way I find genuinely unsettling. He ordered that army out of concern for the Republic. He wanted them to survive the war he'd seen, and the specific mechanism of their destruction was delivery, on time, to spec from the invoice he signed. There's a small mercy in the way it's written, at least. Sifo Dyas never finds out. He goes down over Obadiah still thinking he's done a difficult, unpopular, necessary thing, and dies believing he saved everyone. I think I'd rather that, on balance. The alternative version, where he survives to Coruscant and watches the troopers march past under the Chancellor's window, doesn't bear thinking about. And the Kaminoans, for their part, never questioned any of it. A single Jedi turns up, places an order for over 1 million soldiers, and they simply build them. No Senate authorization, no delegation, no follow-up for a decade. They took the commission and got on with it, the way a shipyard takes a commission, which is its own quiet horror when you look at it directly. The largest army anyone had built in centuries was manufactured by people who considered the whole thing a contract, and who referred to the finished product as units right up until the end. Sifo Dyas gets no memorial, incidentally, no scene where anyone mourns him. Plo Koon recovers his lightsaber from a crash site and brings it to the council. That's about it for the man whose foresight built the machine that killed them all. And he isn't even the last person in this story to find out something enormous and get absolutely nowhere with it. There's a clone trooper who works out what's actually inside his own head and gets a lot closer than anyone else ever managed. It happens in the middle of a battle, which is why it takes a while for anyone to register how wrong it is. The Republic is fighting for a ring-shaped space station called Ringo Vinda. 2 Jedi generals, twin sisters, Tipler and Tipley, are leading the push with clone troopers around them. And a trooper called Tup, who has been in this war for years and has never done anything remotely like this, stops walking, turns, raises his rifle, and shoots Tipler in the head from about 2 meters away. Then he stands there, and in a flat, faraway voice he says, "Good soldiers follow orders. Everyone assumes he's cracked. That's the reasonable assumption. Long war, too many battles, something finally went in his head." They ship him back towards Camino for examination, and he starts deteriorating on the way. And by the time they get him into a medical bay on the cloning world, he's barely lucid. And here's where a clone trooper called Fives gets involved, and where this stops being a war story. Fives is an RC trooper, which means he's the sort of clone the Kaminoans consider slightly over-engineered, independent, tactically creative, a bit mouthy. He's also Toop's friend, and he refuses to accept that his mate just went mad for no reason, which is, in the end, the entire cause of everything that follows. The Kaminoan chief medical scientist, Nala Se, wants Tup terminated so his brain can be studied properly. Fives doesn't want him dead, so he teams up with a medical droid. I want to give the droid its due here, because AZI-3 is one of the great supporting characters in all of this, and nobody talks about him. He's a spindly little diagnostic unit with an anxious voice and a habit of stating his own inadequacy out loud. He is not built for this. He does it anyway. AZI finds something in Tup's brain. He calls it a tumour, because that's the closest thing in his classification system. It comes out, Tup dies, and the two of them get a proper look at the thing. It isn't a tumour. It doesn't match Jango Fett's genetic material, which it should, because everything in a clone's body does. And it isn't fully organic. It's a chip. So Fives does what makes him remarkable, which is that he immediately assumes he has one too, and asks a nervous droid to go into his own skull and get it. They come out with a second chip, in perfect condition, and now they've got a comparison. Toop's has degraded, something in it activated early and wrongly. Fives's is intact. And then they go and look at where these things come from. And this is the bit that turns my stomach slightly, even now. They get into the embryo chambers, the enormous rows of developing clones suspended in fluid, and they find that the chips go in at the 3rd stage of development. Before the clones are people, before they can think, every single one of them all the way back has had this in their head since before they were born. Fives takes this to Jedi Master Shark T, who is stationed on Camino, and to her credit, she takes it seriously enough to overrule Nala Se and escort him personally to Coruscant to present it to the Chancellor. Nala Se's cover story, for the record, is a good one. She says the chips are inhibitors. Jango Fett was a violent man, and his genetic material carries the risk of aggression and instability. So the chips exist to keep the clones docile and reliable. Which sounds plausible, sounds medically responsible, and has the advantage of being sort of true. They were originally designed to make clones obedient. And then she names Sifo Dyas as the man who ordered them, which is the 3rd or 4th time that Dead Man's name gets used to close a conversation. Palpatine receives them personally, in his own office, and what happens next is so brazen that I think it's easy to underrate. Nala Se, on the transport, injects Fives with something. By the time he's standing in front of the Chancellor, he's sweating and shaking and slurring slightly. Palpatine dismisses Shak Ti from the room, sends the only witness out, and then a moment later, they're shouting, and Fives is running, and the Chancellor is calmly telling the guards that the clone attacked him. That's it. That's the whole play. Isolate, discredit, frame. Fives spends the rest of his life as a fugitive on the same planet as the man he's trying to expose. He gets a message to a medic called Kix, who gets him a meeting with Anakin and Rex in a warehouse. He traps them behind a ray shield so they'll have to listen, and he tries to explain, the evidence is in here. It's in all of us, every clone, organic chips built into our genetic code to make us do whatever someone wants. Even kill the Jedi, and the drugs are still in him. And he's exhausted and desperate and shouting, and he's just admitted to trapping his own general behind a shield. He sounds exactly like a man having a breakdown, which is what he was designed to sound like. Commander Fox and the Coruscant Guard find him. Fox shoots him in the chest. He dies in Rex's arms, saying that the mission and the nightmares are finally over. Now Rex, and this is a detail I only learned later, and it made the whole thing worse, files a confidential grievance report afterwards about chips of unknown purpose implanted in the entire army. He files it knowing full well that nothing will happen. He does the paperwork anyway. There is something so bleakly military about that. So here's the shape of it, and it's a different sort of paradox to the ones we've been doing. The truth about Order 66 was discovered. Not guessed at, not theorized, discovered. It was physically located inside a human skull, surgically removed, verified against a second sample from a different subject, traced back to its point of manufacture in the embryo chambers, and then hand-delivered by a Jedi Master to the head of the galactic government. And it made absolutely no difference, not a bit. The plan proceeded exactly on schedule about a year later. The information existed. It was correct. It was in the right hands, in the right room, at the right time. And it still wasn't usable, because the person it had to get past was the person who put it there. Knowledge doesn't do anything on its own. It has to survive contact with whatever institution is supposed to receive it, and this one had been quietly hollowed out from the top down years before. Dave Filoni has talked about why the chips were written in at all, and his answer wasn't really about mechanics. He said it was about showing that Palpatine's plan wasn't flawless, that there were near misses, that there were points where somebody could have stopped it, which I think is the right instinct. The prequel era is a story where everyone is slightly too late, and it only works if you can see the moments where they weren't. Now I want to be fair about the chips because there's a genuine split in fandom here, and I don't think one side is stupid. The objection is that the chips take away the clone's choice. Before the Clone Wars filled this in, Order 66 was an act of betrayal. Soldiers who'd fought alongside these people for 3 years turning on them because they were told to, which is horrifying in a very human, very historical way. Once you add mind control hardware, it becomes a technical event. Nobody chose anything. A switch flipped. And some people feel that's a lesser, safer story. The defense is that it makes the clones victims rather than collaborators, and that this matters enormously given how much time the show spends making you care about them. If Rex shoots Ahsoka, you can't really have Rex afterwards. Not the Rex we got. I land on the defense mostly. I think the show earned it by spending years establishing that these men are individuals with names and preferences and jokes. And having all of that overridden by something installed before they were born is, if anything, more upsetting than betrayal, not less. But I understand the other view completely, and if you think the original version hit harder, you're not wrong too. And Fives isn't even the only near miss, which is the part that makes this era so hard to watch on a rewatch. Dooku tells Obi-Wan the truth to his face on Geonosis. Straight out, no riddle. There's a Sith Lord in control of the Senate. Hundreds of senators are under his influence, and the war is being run from both ends. He names him in some tellings. Obi-Wan doesn't believe a word of it, because it's coming from a man who has him chained to a wall, which is a fair instinct and completely the wrong call. He reports it to the council. They discuss it, and Mace essentially says that a Sith would not be allowed to control the Republic without them sensing it, which is the single most expensive sentence anyone says in the prequels. Yoda feels the Jedi dying during Order 66, and it disturbs him, and he carries on. The Council notice that their ability to use the Force has been getting weaker for years. They say so, out loud, once, and their conclusion is that the war is clouding things, rather than that something is standing very close to them with its hand over their eyes. And in the temple archives, there's an entire section of the map missing, and the response is to trust the archive. Every one of those is a person doing something reasonable with the information available. That's what I find so grim about it. There's no idiot in the room. It's a group of intelligent, disciplined, well-meaning people, each of whom makes a defensible call, and the calls add up to an extinction. Filoni's read on it, and I think this is right, is that the tragedy only works if the near misses are real. If it's inevitable, it's just a machine grinding. If somebody could have stopped it 4 separate times, it's a story. One footnote on the chips that I think is genuinely lovely, and it's about the ones who got out. A handful of clones did have their chips fail or get removed. Rex has his taken out. A few others manage it in various series in various painful ways. And what's consistent about all of them afterwards is that they don't become different people. They become the same people, with the volume of their own opinions turned up, which suggests the chip was never installing loyalty. The loyalty was real. The chip was only there for the one instruction the loyalty would have refused, and the phrase itself is worth a moment, because the show does something deliberate with it. Good soldiers follow orders. Tup says it in a daze after shooting a Jedi. Later, other clones say it in exactly the same flat register, right before doing the same thing. It's not a slogan anyone taught them. It comes out of the chip, so by the time you hear it in Revenge of the Sith, a film made years earlier, where nobody says it at all, you've been given a way to hear those scenes differently. The clones on Utapau turning their guns on Obi-Wan aren't deciding anything. Something is speaking through them in a voice they'd recognise as their own. Either way, Fives got there. He worked it out on his own, in a medical bay, with a nervous droid, and he had it in his hand, and it didn't matter. Which does raise a slightly uncomfortable question about this whole galaxy, when you line it up next to the last 2 sections. Nobody ever seems able to use what they know, and yet there is one place in this story where somebody could genuinely have gone back and intervened in events, and it's sitting behind a painting on a farming planet. The mural comes first. It's on the wall inside a stone temple on Lothal, which is a grassland world in the Outer Rim, mostly farms and factories and a lot of open sky. The Empire has dug the whole site out of the ground and put a research operation on top of it, because they want in, and the painting shows 3 figures. Nobody in the story can name them with any confidence. One of them is winged, one of them is horned, one of them stands in the middle. If you've seen the Mortis arc, and we're coming to that later, so I won't unpack it now, you'll recognise them instantly, and the show is very deliberately not explaining that to you. Behind the mural, there's a door. Ezra Bridger opens it. He's a kid from Lothal, a street thief who turned out to be Force sensitive, and by this point in the story, he's lost his master, and he's angry about it in the way that 18-year-olds are angry, which is to say, completely, and without any useful outlet. And what's on the other side is the strangest thing Star Wars has ever put on screen. There's no ground. There's a lattice of pale pathways suspended in a black field full of stars, and set into that lattice, everywhere, are portals. Hundreds of them. Each one is a moment, not a place, a moment. They're all open at once, and they all lead somewhere in time. The proper name for it, when the material gets around to giving it one, is the world between worlds. It's also called the Vergent Scatter. The description that gets used is that it connects all of time and space, a conduit between the living and the dead, and that anyone who controlled it would effectively have mastery over everything. But what actually sells it isn't the description, it's the sound. As Ezra walks through, he can hear voices bleeding out of the doorways. Yoda, Qui-Gon Jinn, Ahsoka, his own master, Kanan, and Obi-Wan, not the Ewan McGregor version, the Alec Guinness one, a recording made decades before this episode existed, from a man who'd been dead for years by the time it aired, and Rey, from a film set roughly 40 years after the scene we're watching. That last one is the moment it lands, I think. You're listening to a character who hasn't been born yet. The show doesn't remark on it. It just puts it in the mix and carries on, and you sit there going, hang on. Ezra finds a door showing the duel on Malachor. Ahsoka Tano against Darth Vader in the ruins of a Sith temple, 2 years earlier in the story and 2 years earlier in real life for the audience, who had spent that entire time assuming she was dead. The show had been extremely careful never to confirm it. He reaches through the door and pulls her out of the exact instant before the blade lands. And she lives. That's it. That's the fix. Ahsoka Tano is alive because a teenager grabbed her arm through a hole in time. Palpatine turns up almost immediately, which tells you something. He's been trying to get into this place for years. He's got an Imperial minister running the excavation. He clearly knows exactly what's under there, and the moment the door is genuinely open, he's clawing at it, reaching through fire towards Ezra. Ahsoka and Ezra get out. She goes back into her own moment in the collapsing temple, on the understanding that she's going to have to find her own way from there. He goes back to Lothal and shuts the whole thing, permanently. But the part I actually want to sit with is the door he doesn't open, because he finds Kanan's death too, his master holding back an explosion with his bare hands so that everyone else on the platform can get clear in the last seconds of his life. It's right there. Ezra can see it. He starts moving, and Ahsoka stops him. She tells him that Kanan gave his life so the others could live, and that if you take him out of that moment, the others die instead. And then she says the line that reframes the entire scene, which is that she couldn't save her own master either. And neither can he. That's Anakin she's talking about, obviously, standing in a place where every moment in history is a door, having a conversation about the one door you don't open. Now the rules. Because everyone's immediate reaction to this is that it breaks the entire franchise, and I don't think it does. Dave Filoni has been fairly clear about how he sees it, and his framing is that it's not a corridor where you go in one door and come out somewhere else. You can gain knowledge of the past and of futures that may happen. You can sometimes choose to alter something, but it's perilous, and when you do alter something, you have no way of knowing that isn't how it always happened. Read that last clause again because it's doing a lot of work. That's not a rewriting model. That's a closed loop. Ahsoka was always pulled out of Malachor. There is no earlier version of history where she died, and then a boy changed it. The rescue was always part of how the duel went. It just took the audience 2 years and Ezra about 4 minutes to find out. Which is the same structure as everything else we've talked about tonight, really. It looks like a chance to change things, and it turns out to be a description of things that were already the case. And now the question I find genuinely fascinating, which the material has never answered. Palpatine knew. He had people digging. He was close enough to reach an arm through, and in a life spent acquiring every conceivable form of power at enormous cost, with no apparent moral flaw whatsoever, he never used it. Not once. Not to fix any of his own setbacks, of which there were a few. Not to check on his rivals. Not to stop a farm boy from getting his hands on a proton torpedo. There are 3 ways to read that. Either it doesn't work the way he hoped, and he knew it, or the Force simply won't permit it, and the only reason Ezra managed anything is that the Force wanted Ahsoka out of there. Or he did try at some point, off screen, and it always went exactly the way it went. I lean towards the second, personally, but I'd be lying if I said the story had settled it. There's something almost polite about the way the show handles it, though. It builds a door onto every moment in its own history, proves on screen that the thing works, and then quietly shuts it and declines to bring it up again. A couple of details from the approach to that door that I don't want to skip past because they're some of the strangest images in the whole show. Ezra doesn't find the temple on his own. He's led there by wolves. They're called Lothwolves. They're roughly the size of a small car, and they've been appearing to him for most of the final season. They can travel between distant points on the planet in a way that shouldn't be possible. One of them speaks, and one of them at a certain point says a name, Doom, which is Kanan's surname, the one he was born with before he had to bury it and become a smuggler to survive. The show never explains what they are, not properly. The nearest it gets is that they're bound up with Lothal itself and with the Force, and that the planet has been quietly protecting its own temple for a very long time. I like that enormously, actually. There's a temptation in modern franchises to explain the mystical bits until they've got a mechanism attached, and Rebels just declines. Big wolves, they know things. Off you go. And then there's the question of why nobody's used the door since, which is the practical objection everyone raises about 10 seconds after the episode ends. The answer the story gives is that Ezra shut it, and the temple was subsequently pulled apart. The Lothal gateway is gone. Whether it was the only one is a different question, and the material has been careful not to say. It's referred to as a plane that touches everything, which implies there could be other openings, and it has surfaced again since, which rather confirms it. But the more satisfying answer is the one baked into the rules. Even with a door open in front of you, and even with the moment you want visible through it, the thing you change is already load-bearing. Ezra could see Kanan. He could have reached. What he could not do was reach without unmaking the people Kanan died for. That's not a lock on the door. That's just what the situation is. One more thing about the pathways themselves, because the design is doing something clever that I only noticed on a rewatch. They're not corridors. They're not laid out like a building. They branch and cross and double back. And there's no sense of a route from anywhere to anywhere. You could stand there for a lifetime and never find a particular door unless something led you to it, which quietly answers a question the episode never asks out loud, which is why Ezra doesn't simply go and fix everything. He can't navigate. Nobody could. It's not a library with an index. It's a sky full of doors, and the two he finds are the two the Force put in front of him. And the place isn't finished with the story yet, because it comes back in live action. In the Ahsoka series, in an episode called Shadow Warrior, Ahsoka loses a fight, falls a very long way, and wakes up on those same pale pathways, decades older. White-lecked now, and Anakin Skywalker is standing there. Not Vader. Anakin in the clothes he was wearing at the end of the Clone Wars, looking exactly the way he looked the last time she saw him, as a person. She tells him he hasn't changed. He tells her she's grown old, which is a properly funny line delivered completely straight. She asks why she's there, and he says he's come to finish her training. She says it's a bit late for that. He says nobody's too old to learn, and then ignites his lightsaber and attacks her, and tells her the lesson is live or die. Then he cuts the pathway out from under her, and she falls. And when she lands, she's her young Padawan self again, in her old outfit, in the middle of a Clone Wars battle, with clone troopers dying around her, and a much younger Anakin shouting orders. And she has to walk back through her own war, as the child she actually was, and look at what it cost. Filoni has said, more or less openly, that part of the point of the World Between Worlds was to build a place where all the films and the shows connect. So it reads as one thing rather than a shelf of separate objects, which is exactly what it does. It's the room where the 1977 Obi-Wan and the 2019 Rey and a cartoon Padawan and a live-action Ghost all exist in the same acoustic space. It is functionally the franchise looking at itself, which is a slightly odd thing to build into your own mythology, and I rather like that they did it anyway. Anyway, speaking of things that refuse to stay in the past, we should probably talk about the man who fell down a reactor shaft and then turned up 30 years later on a planet nobody had heard of. Let's get the joke out of the way, because pretending it isn't there would be silly. The Rise of Skywalker opens with an opening crawl about a broadcast. A voice that everyone in the galaxy recognizes and that the audience recognizes faster, coming out of the dark. And then we cut to the Resistance base, and Poe Dameron has to deliver the exposition, and what he says is, somehow, Palpatine returned. 3 words, and they became the single most mocked line in 50 years of Star Wars, which is a competitive field. I'll be honest, I laughed too. In the cinema, out loud, slightly rudely. I'm not going to defend the delivery. Someone had to stand in a room and say the plot out loud, and the phrasing they landed on was a shrug. But I do want to defend what's underneath it, because there's actually a fairly detailed and quite grim explanation sitting behind that word, and most of it is in the novelization rather than the film, which is a choice I have opinions about. Here's what the material says. At the moment Vader picks him up and drops him down the Death Star's reactor shaft, Palpatine does not simply die. As he's falling, he throws his consciousness across the galaxy, an enormous act of concentration in the last seconds he has, into a body that has been waiting for him. That body is a clone. Grown in advance on a hidden world called Exegol by a cult who had been preparing for exactly this. And the transfer goes badly. This is the bit that gets lost in the summary. He arrives weakened and damaged, and the body cannot hold him. Not for long. The novelization is fairly blunt about it. Clone flesh isn't built to contain that much dark side power, and it starts rotting from the inside out. That's why he looks the way he looks in the film. It's not scarring from an explosion, it's decay. What's keeping him upright is machinery. A mechanical spine, the book calls it an Omin harness, plus a throne, plus vials of preservative fluid feeding into his neck through old Clone Wars era hardware. Rey, at one point in the book, notices that he smells of rotting meat. That's the level of detail available, and the film shows you the vials, briefly, in a wide shot, and never mentions them again, which is genuinely my main complaint about the whole thing. All the horrible, specific, useful material is sitting there in the supporting text, and on screen you get one word from a pilot. Show me the vials? Give me 10 seconds of somebody changing them. That's all it needed. So what were the cult doing all that time? Trying to build him something better. They're called the Sith Eternal, and they spent decades splicing genes and growing bodies, trying to produce a vessel that could actually hold him. Most of the results were destroyed. The term the material uses for these engineered beings is strandcast, which I quite like as a word. It sounds industrial rather than magical, which is the correct register for what's happening. And one of them lived. That's Snoke, which retroactively rearranges the entire sequel trilogy, and I don't think people sat with it enough at the time. Snoke isn't a mysterious power who came out of nowhere after the Empire fell. He's a failed body. Not worthy as a vessel, Palpatine's own account is that Snoke's form couldn't contain him, but force-sensitive enough to be worth keeping and steering. A puppet. A very effective one, running the First Order from a chair for years, with someone else's hand inside him the whole time. Palpatine says it to Kylo Ren directly. I have been every voice you have ever heard inside your head. Every voice. The one that pushed him away from Luke. The one that told him to kill his father. Snoke's voice, and the darkness he thought was his own, and probably a few others besides. There was never a moment in that young man's life where the pressure wasn't coming from the same source, and this is where the actual paradox lives, and it's got nothing to do with cloning. The rule of 2 exists for a reason. It's the arrangement the Sith have run on for 1,000 years. One master to embody the power, one apprentice to crave it, and the entire point is that it's a design for succession. The apprentice is supposed to eventually kill the master. That's not a failure state, that's the mechanism. It's how the Sith avoid the thing that destroyed them the first time round, which was a large number of dark side users all standing in a room competing, and it's how they guarantee that each generation is stronger than the last. Power is meant to move. Palpatine's entire project is the refusal of that. He doesn't want to be succeeded. He never has. Everything he does from the moment he kills his own master onwards is an attempt to be the last link in the chain permanently. And the way he achieves it is by installing a proxy master who takes an apprentice who kills the proxy master. So the ritual runs, the succession appears to happen, the paperwork is in order, and at the end of it the same consciousness is still holding the pen. He beat the rule by running both ends of it. He is the master and the master's master, and the voice in the apprentice's head, which is the exact arrangement the rule was written to prevent. There's a smaller thread worth pulling too, and it's a callback rather than a new argument, so I'll keep it short. That story he told Anakin in the Opera House, the one about a Sith who could keep the people he cared about from dying, was not just bait. It was a description of the technique he was already working towards. He used the truth as a lure. The most effective lie he ever told was one where the content was accurate and only the intention was false. The infrastructure behind all this is worth a minute too, because it's been sitting in the background of the new canon since long before anyone knew what it was for. The plan has a name. It's called the contingency, and pieces of it have been turning up in novels since the mid-2010s, in the Aftermath books, in Lost Stars, scattered through the material about what happened to the Empire after Endor, and the shape of it is genuinely nasty. Palpatine did not intend the Empire to survive him. That's the bit people find hard to believe the first time they hear it. If he died, the Empire was to be dismantled, fleets sent into the unknown regions, records destroyed, whole worlds abandoned. There's a sequence where an automated system starts wiping Imperial data across the galaxy and burning the planet it's sitting on, because the man who built it had decided that a galaxy which could kill him did not deserve to keep his things. So the First Order isn't the Empire's leftovers, exactly. It's the thing that was grown out in the dark on purpose, with the surviving officers and the money and the ships all pointed at a cult on a hidden world, waiting for the day the old man's body could be got working again. Which is a 30-year construction project run by people who had never met him and were maintaining a rotting clone in a chair the entire time. Their god was in the building and he smelled awful and needed his fluids changed, and they kept turning up. I find that the most interesting thing in the sequel trilogy, personally, and it happens entirely off-screen. There's a line of Palpatine's from Revenge of the Sith that gets a lot funnier and a lot worse once you know all this, incidentally. In his private box at the opera, before his transformation, he tells Anakin that the dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. And it plays, in that scene, as a piece of sales patter. Vague, ominous, deliberately unspecific. He says the same sentence, almost word for word, on Exegol. 30-odd years, and one rotting body later. It was never patter. He was describing his own retirement plan. It's also worth saying plainly that this was not a new idea, and the film has taken a lot of stick for something it half inherited. Back in the early 90s, there was a comic series called Dark Empire, in which the Emperor returns from the dead in a series of cloned bodies on a hidden world, with a fleet, and starts pulling a Skywalker towards him. That's legends now, not canon, but it was enormously influential at the time, and a great many people who grew up with it consider it the natural continuation. The difference is that the comics clones were young and healthy, and frankly rather magnificent, and the version we got is a rotting old man in a chair who smells bad. I know which one I find more frightening. And there's one more piece, which is Rey. The material fills this in through a novel about Luke and Lando investigating the Sith Eternal, plus the film's own novelization. Rey's father was called Dathan. He was one of the Strandcasts, a body grown from Palpatine's genetic material, made in the hope of housing him, and useless for the purpose, because he wasn't force-sensitive. Which is why he got a life. He was a failure, so nobody wanted him, so he was able to run and have a daughter and hide her on a junk planet and die protecting the secrets of where she was. Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter by way of a laboratory reject. I find that a lot more interesting than the version where it's a straightforward family tree, and I don't think the film quite got the credit for it, partly because the film also barely explains it. Now, the bit I promised in the first section, which is what all this does to the prophecy. Anakin destroys the Sith at Endor. That's the reading Lucas has confirmed more than once. The moment where a dying man throws his master down a shaft is the moment the prophecy completes. Both Sith gone, master and apprentice, because Vader dies too, except one of them didn't stay gone. Roughly 30 years later, there is a Sith Lord sitting on a throne on Exegol with a fleet, a cult, and a granddaughter. So what happened to the prophecy? There are only unsatisfying answers. Either it was fulfilled and then broken, which means prophecies in this universe are reversible and therefore don't mean much, or it was never fulfilled at Endor at all and Anakin's sacrifice was a step rather than an ending, which undercuts one of the great scenes in cinema, or it was fulfilled a second time by Rey on Exegol, using the Skywalker lightsabers and taking the Skywalker name, in which case the Chosen One prophecy has been completed by two different people, which is not really how the singular works. I don't have a fix for that. I've read a lot of attempts and none of them hold up without some fairly heroic squinting. It is, as far as I can tell, the largest genuinely unresolved contradiction in the whole saga. And the interesting thing about it is that, unlike the medical question we ran into earlier, it isn't an oversight, it's structural. It's what happens when you build a story with a definite ending and then keep going. That said, and I'll leave it here because I don't want to be sour about it, there's one of those old prophecies from the Master and Apprentice list that lines up with this uncomfortably well. When the righteous lose the light, evil once dead shall return. Whether that was intended as a signpost or whether it's just a nicely vague sentence that happened to land, I genuinely don't know. It's the sort of thing that could be either. Anyway, since we've spent a while now on a story going back and changing what already happened, let's talk about the times it did that deliberately, and the ones where it absolutely got away with it. There's a shed on a mining platform in the middle of a rainstorm, and a tired man in a work coat is recording a message. He's got maybe a few minutes. It's raining hard enough that the audio's rough. And what he's saying, to a daughter he last saw when she was small, and who he has no reason to think will ever hear this, is that he did it on purpose. He put a weakness in it, deliberately, buried in a reactor design so deep that nobody would look. And then he stayed for 15 years, being helpful and indispensable, so that nobody would take him off the project and notice. That's Galen Erso. And what he's confessing to is a 2-meter hole. Now back up to where the hole came from. In the first film, the plan for destroying the Death Star involves a thermal exhaust port, 2 meters wide, on the surface of a moon-sized battle station, running directly to the main reactor. Hit it with proton torpedoes and the whole thing goes up. General Dodonna presents this to a briefing room, and even the pilots think it sounds daft, which is why Wedge gets the line about it being impossible, even for a computer. And people have been raising an eyebrow at that for as long as there have been people watching Star Wars. It's a moon with a straw in it. Lucas's original answer, and it's a perfectly decent one, was arrogance. The Empire didn't think a one-man fighter mattered. Their entire defensive doctrine is built around capital ships and turbo lasers, and the idea that a farm boy in a snub fighter could do anything to them is not a threat model they take seriously. Tarkin refuses to evacuate right up until the point where he's vapor. The whole film is about a big thing that can't see small things. Then in 2016, you get Rogue One, plus a novel called Catalyst that sets it up, and the answer changes completely. The hole is there because a scientist put it there. Galen Erso is coerced into working on the project, works out that refusing achieves nothing because they'll finish it without him, and decides that the only useful thing he can do is stay inside and sabotage it in a way that will survive review. So he designs the reactor with a flaw in it, and then spends the rest of his life being the most valuable man on the program, so that nobody replaces him and redesigns his section. And then he gets word out, that's the other half of it. A flaw nobody knows about is just a flaw. He needs the rebellion to know where to aim, which is why there's a message and a defecting pilot, and eventually a lot of people dying on a beach so that a set of technical drawings can get onto a ship. What I find properly strange about this, and it's not a criticism, the effect existed for 39 years before the cause did. In 1977, the whole is a screenwriting decision. It exists because Lucas needed a way for the good guys to win a battle they can't win conventionally, and because he'd watched a lot of war films about bombing runs. There is no in-universe reason for it beyond the arrogance handwave. In 2016, a cause gets manufactured and installed behind it. And now, in the story, a man spent a decade and a half of his life engineering that exact vulnerability so that exact shot could happen, which means the sequence of events runs backwards. The consequence came first, then reached back and built itself a reason. That's not something a character did. That's something the franchise did over 4 decades in public. And there's a version of this that's even funnier, which is the Kessel Run. Han Solo in a cantina, trying to sell a job. It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. A parsec is a real unit, and it's a unit of distance, about 3¼ light years, which is something like 19 trillion miles. So bragging about your ship's speed by citing a distance is a bit like saying you're a fast runner because you did a marathon in 26 miles. For decades, the standard reading was that Lucas simply didn't know. And honestly, the evidence isn't bad. In the novelization, which came out before the film, the line ends with 12 standard time parts instead, which suggests somebody, somewhere in the process, was treating it as a time unit. And Alec Guinness's reaction in the scene is a beautifully judged bit of nothing. The face of a man who is not going to argue with a smuggler about units. But Lucas was already patching it within months of release, talking about the Falcon's navigation computer being able to calculate faster and shorter routes than other ships. So the shortcut explanation is nearly as old as the mistake. What actually locks it in as true, though, is a small moment in The Force Awakens that I think is one of the smartest things in that film. Rey, realizing what ship she's on, says this is the ship that made the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs, and Han, instantly, without thinking about it, snaps 12. He corrects a stranger about a number in the middle of a crisis for no advantage whatsoever. That's not a man maintaining a lie, that's a man who is annoyed about the record. And then Solo actually shows you the run. The route normally goes the long way around a cluster of black holes called the Maw, and the shortcut goes through, using a droid's navigational data to calculate the jumps. So the boast isn't about speed at all. It's about distance, exactly as stated, and it's a boast about nerve rather than engines. He cut the corner past a set of black holes because he could. 41 years to turn a unit error into a character detail, which is, in its way, quite an achievement. There's a whole cluster of these, and I don't want to grind through all of them, but a few are worth a nod on the way past. Leia, in Return of the Jedi, describing her real mother, she was very beautiful, kind but sad, which is lovely and completely impossible once Revenge of the Sith establishes that Padme dies minutes after the birth. The usual patch is force sensitivity and impressions rather than memories, and it works about as well as you'd expect, which is to say, it works if you'd like it to. Obi-Wan telling Luke he doesn't remember ever owning a droid, while sitting 3 feet from a droid he spent a war with. I've heard every explanation for this. He's lying to protect the boy. He's being pedantic because he never technically owned R2. He's an old man in a cave. Personally, I think Alec Guinness is playing it as a man, choosing his words very carefully, and I'm content with that. Boba Fett falling into the Sarlacc, which we're told digests you slowly over 1,000 years, and then simply climbing out. Fine, honestly, fine. That one never bothered me. If your monster's defining feature is that it takes 1,000 years, then year one is early days. And then there's one that goes the other way, which I think is worth including, because it's the exception that proves how the process works. In The Last Jedi, Vice Admiral Holdo turns a cruiser around, points it at a First Order dreadnought, and jumps to light speed through it. The ship comes apart. So does most of the fleet behind it. It is, visually, one of the best things in any of these films. They drop the sound entirely, which is a decision I still think about. The problem is what it implies, because if a ship can be used as a light-speed missile, then almost every space battle in the saga was fought wrong. You don't need a Death Star. You don't need a fleet. You need one freighter, one droid, and a set of coordinates. The rebellion loses a lot of people in trenches over the years doing it the hard way, and the fixes offered afterwards have never fully worked. There's material suggesting it needs a very specific set of conditions, or a functioning Navi computer with a live lock, or that the odds of it connecting are astronomically poor, and Holdo got lucky, all of which might be true, and none of which is in the film. So here's the difference. When the exhaust port got a cause installed behind it, the cause was a person with a motive, and the story got bigger. When the Lightspeed RAM got its explanations, they were rules, technical caveats, dropped into supporting material, whose only job is to stop you asking. And rules don't add anything, they just close a door. While I'm here, one small repair I think is close to perfect, and nobody ever mentions it. The Death Star plans in the original film arrive in Leia's droid with no explanation whatsoever. She says she's on a diplomatic mission. Vader says she's part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. And the film moves on, because in 1977, the plans were just a thing the plot needed to have. Rogue One doesn't explain that. It spends 2 hours making it cost something. And the last shot hands the disc into a corridor and a woman turns round holding it, and the film ends on the exact frame the older film opens on. That's the good version of this. No caveats, no technical footnote, just here is what that object weighed. The general shape of all this is what interests me more than any individual case. Star Wars is a story that keeps converting its own accidents into intentions. Not occasionally, constantly, as a house style. A slip of the tongue becomes a smuggling route. A plot convenience becomes a man's life's work. A vague line about a prophecy becomes a novel. And the strange thing is what that does to you as a viewer, because you hold both versions at once. You know perfectly well that the exhaust port was a bombing run homage written by a young man in the 70s, and you also know that Galen Erso put it there, and neither of those cancels the other out. They just sit side by side in your head, both true in different registers, which is, if you want to be grand about it, how myth actually works. Old stories get patched by whoever's telling them next. The seams show. Nobody minds. Do all of them earn it? No, I'd say Galen Erso earns it enormously. It turns a gag about incompetence into the best character in Rogue One, and gives that film its entire reason to exist. The Parsec fix earns it because it's playful and it costs nothing. Some of the others feel more like homework, like someone going through a list of complaints and ticking them off, and you can usually tell the difference because the good ones give you something you didn't have before, and the weaker ones only take away a question. But that's a matter of taste, and I'd rather a franchise that fusses over this stuff than one that doesn't. Right, on the subject of things nobody can agree on, we should probably talk about what balance is actually supposed to mean, because I've been circling it all night, and I've been putting it off. The distress signal is 2,000 years old. That's how it starts. Anakin, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka are on a shuttle mid-war, and they pick up a Jedi beacon using a code that's been out of service since before any of them were born. They investigate, because of course they do, and something takes hold of the ship and pulls it somewhere else entirely. The place is called Mortis, and it looks wrong in a way the show is very deliberate about. The light shifts, the seasons change in the space of a scene, the geography rearranges itself. It's not a planet so much as an idea with weather. 3 beings live there. They're called the Father, the Daughter, and the Son. The daughter is the light side. The son is the dark. And the father is the thing that has been holding the two of them apart for longer than anyone can measure. And he is getting old and he is tired. He's also the reason they were brought there. He wants to test whether Anakin is the chosen one. Now I've spent a good chunk of tonight on what the Jedi thought balance meant, and on what Lucas has said it meant, and I promised I'd get to the version that complicates both. This is it. Because the Father doesn't want Anakin to destroy the dark side, he wants him to hold it. That's the job as the Father describes it. Stay here, take my place, keep my children in check the way I have. Not eliminate the Son, contain him. Balance as an ongoing act of maintenance performed by someone strong enough to stand between two forces that will never stop pulling. And that is a flatly different definition to the one the Jedi Council have been working from since before anyone can remember, delivered by a being who has a considerably better claim to know what he's talking about than any of them. Anakin says no, obviously. He says he has a life, a war, responsibilities, which is reasonable, and also, given what happens over the following 2 years, one of the more painful refusals in the saga. Things then go badly, in the way that things do. The son wants the father's power. There's a dagger that can kill a force wielder and everyone spends an episode trying to get hold of it. The daughter dies taking a blade meant for her father, and in one of the strangest and most beautiful sequences the show ever managed, her dying life force is used to bring Ahsoka back, who the son had already killed. Yes, Ahsoka dies on Mortis and gets restored. Nobody talks about this enough. And then the son does the thing that makes this a paradox rather than just an odd episode. He shows Anakin the future, not vaguely, specifically. The duel on Mustafar, the destruction of Alderaan, and at the end of it, the mask and that sound, the breathing. In an animated show in 2011, they put Darth Vader's respirator over a vision of a man who doesn't know yet. Anakin sees all of it, and he reacts exactly the way you'd expect a decent, frightened man to react, which is that he agrees to anything that will stop it. He accepts the son's offer. Together, they'll destroy Sidious and prevent the war, and none of it will happen. He is, at that precise moment, 100% correct about what needs to be prevented and completely wrong about how, and the father steps in. He says the son has broken the rules of time, which is a fascinating phrase to throw away in a cartoon, incidentally, because it implies there are rules, and that showing someone their own future violates them. And then he wipes it. Not the whole trip, just the future. Anakin walks off Mortis remembering the son and the daughter and Ahsoka dying, but not a conversation with the ghost of Qui-Gon Jinn. But the vision of what he becomes is gone. The father does this to save him. That's the explicit reason. The knowledge was the hook the dark side had in him, so the father removes the knowledge to break the hold. There's a smaller one buried on Mortis too, and it's about ghosts. Qui-Gon appears to Anakin there, and Qui-Gon is the one who cracked the whole business of surviving death with your identity intact. The technique that Yoda and Obi-Wan then learn and pass on. Which means the man who discovered how to persist after death had to die to demonstrate it. And both of the people who eventually taught it to Luke taught it to him from the other side. Obi-Wan says the line to Vader on the Death Star, and it's meant as a threat. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And the joke of that scene is that Obi-Wan says it first and means it literally and is correct. He becomes a voice in a cockpit that wins a battle. Vader, who has spent decades chasing power and killed a great many people for it, does get that when he dies. He gets to stand at the edge of a party on a forest moon, briefly, and look at his son, which is, I suspect, the actual answer to what the dark side gets you, delivered without a single line of dialogue. So here's the shape of it. The one man in the galaxy positioned to prevent all of it was shown all of it, clearly, in detail with the sound effects. And the closest thing this story has to an embodiment of balance itself took the knowledge away, out of kindness, and by doing so guaranteed the future in the vision. Every single one of these paradoxes has the same joint in it, and I didn't plan that when I started making notes for this. Foresight that isn't information. Knowledge that can't be used. A door that stays shut. Somebody sees the future, does something reasonable about it, and the reasonable thing is the mechanism. And that brings us back round to balance, and to the fact that after all this time, this franchise has never agreed with itself about its own central concept. Here's the honest state of it. The Jedi say balance means no Sith. Obi-Wan says it on Mustafar. The Council operates on it, and it's the reading the prequels present as orthodoxy. Lucas says it's about the selfish and the selfless, being held in check, and has been reasonably consistent that the dark side is a sickness rather than a counterweight. Under that reading, balance is a psychological state as much as a cosmic one, and every person contains both halves. The Father says it's a tension you maintain forever, by hand, and that removing one side would be a disaster. And in The Force Awakens, an old man called Lor San Tekka says there can be no balance in the Force without the Jedi, which is a fourth position again, and one that puts a specific religious order at the centre of a universal principle, which is quite a claim. These are not compatible. You can do some work to smooth them together, and people have written a lot of words trying, but if you're honest about it, they're four different ideas wearing the same word. There's a fifth position too, and it's my favourite, partly because the character delivering it is so odd. On a planet called Attolan, there's a creature the size of a small hill, made mostly of rock and moss and long limbs, with a voice like a very patient uncle. He calls himself the Bendu, and he describes himself as sitting in the middle between the light and the dark. Not neutral exactly, in the middle. He's quite specific about the difference, and when Kanan comes to him for help, the Bendu is entirely uninterested in the war. Rebels, Empire, Jedi, Sith, none of it registers as important to him. He talks about it the way you talk about weather in a country you don't live in. Then the Empire turns up and starts shooting, and he loses his temper, and he becomes an enormous storm and starts destroying both sides indiscriminately. Which is, when you think about it, a completely coherent position for something that genuinely represents balance. He isn't on anyone's team. He's the middle, and the middle does not like being disturbed. He also gets one of the best lines in any of this, aimed at an Imperial Admiral standing in the wreckage. "I see your defeat, like many arms surrounding you in a cold embrace." And then he laughs and vanishes. Nobody has ever come back and explained the Bendu either. He's just out there, being enormous, having opinions, and there's Luke's version, which arrives late and might be the most honest of the lot. Sitting on a rock on an island, he asks Rey what she thinks the Force is, and she gives the answer everyone gives, which is roughly that it's a power Jedi have that lets them move things. And he tells her that's not it. It's an energy between all things, a tension, a balance that binds the universe together. And then he points out that the Force does not belong to the Jedi, and that if the Jedi were the thing keeping the dark side in check, then the dark side should have gone out with them, and it very much did not. He's making a slightly bitter point about his own order there, but he's also making the only definition in the whole saga that doesn't put a faction at the centre of it. and I've decided I don't mind. Because I think that's what happens to a concept that gets handled by hundreds of people over half a century. Balance in Star Wars works the way words like justice or freedom work in the real world, which is that everyone agrees it's the goal and nobody agrees what it is, and the disagreement is where all the interesting stuff happens. If the saga had pinned it down in 1980 with a clear definition, we'd have had a much tidier mythology and about 40 years less to talk about, which is not a defense of sloppiness exactly. It's just an observation that the vagueness has been load-bearing this whole time. I want to end on something small, because I don't think this deserves a big finish. None of what we've gone through tonight is a mistake. Or some of it started as a mistake, obviously. The parsec thing definitely did, but it stopped being one a long time ago. What this actually is what happens when a very large number of people tell the same story for 50 years, each of them revising the last lot, each of them slightly in love with it and slightly annoyed by it. You get loops, you get corridors that lead back into rooms you've already been in. You get a hole in a wall that somebody built a whole biography behind. It's less like a novel and more like an old house that's been extended 6 times by different families, and the odd corners are where you can see the joins. Which brings me back to that sentence I started on. There's a name attached to it in the earliest drafts, buried in the paperwork, and barely ever mentioned since, the Journal of the Wills. The idea that the whole saga is an ancient record, transcribed and translated and handed on by people who weren't there. If that's the conceit, then everything we've been through tonight is exactly what you'd expect. Somebody misremembers a unit of measurement and it gets copied for decades. Somebody's prophecy survives without its author. 2 accounts of the same night disagree, and both stay in the book, because nobody has the authority to throw either one out. I've got a whole video I want to make at some point about the older prophecies, the High Republic material, the egg that cracks, all that, because there's a lot in there and I've barely scratched it tonight. That'll be a while off, but it's coming. Anyway, that's the lot, and it's still a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, which is the only line in the whole thing nobody has ever gone back and corrected. Everything after it has been revised, argued over, deleted from an archive, restored, and explained twice. That first sentence has just sat there, exactly as it was, since the beginning. Sleep well,